5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Just over the drive. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steve and Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers, and golf is in the air. You might have been watching the Masters over the past couple of days, and you know that yesterday Sergio Garcia of Spain won it. Now, the last Spaniard to do so was in 1999, was Jose Maria Olazabal. I probably said that horrifically wrong, but things ended in a playoffs. And if you are not too familiar with golf, yes, golf has playoffs. Trev, what did you think of Sergio Garcia's performance?
Well, really, it was something that was fantastic leading up until Sunday. Wavered a little bit in between on Sunday, and the Masters is one of those tougher tournaments. It's one where it's always the same course with Augusta National, and it's that for a reason. It's a tough course, and this is a reason why it's the most popular golf tournament that happens. In the case for Sergio, this was him getting a huge monkey off his back, turned professional in 1999, and I mean, this is his first major victory after a lot of runner-ups finishes, including one back in 1999 and some more recently with 2007, 2008, and other tournaments. His best finish at the Masters before today was tied for 8th in 2013. So he's a guy that has played phenomenally throughout his career, struggled at times just enough to end up not winning some majors over the years, but finally got that huge monkey off his back with a huge win today at Augusta National.
So a minute ago I mentioned about Jose Maria Olazabal. He actually won it twice in 1994 and 1999. Are you so impressed with Garcia's play that you think he'll be able to win it again in the near future?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question just because it did take him so long to win it this first time. Now he's 37. And I mean, it's golf, right? So, I mean, this is a sport that you can play as you get older. To those years, you can still keep going. Still 3 other majors this year for him to try to get that second major, which would be nice. But it'll be difficult to see if he can pull out even just another major just because things haven't seemed to fall in his way. I mean, really, if you watched the tail end of the Masters today, his final round, it was almost that way as well. But Justin Rose struggled just as much, the guy that ended up finishing as the runner of the playoff hole, and just by a smidge.
So moving on from the playoffs of golf to the playoffs of hockey, things have been decided. The Leafs squeak in there with the second wildcard spot, but the problem with that is they get paired up with the Washington Capitals. Now, before I want to talk about that matchup in particular, I want to talk about the Leafs and the Austin Matthews-Mitch Marner debate. Who do you think wound up being the bigger name? Because at the beginning of the year, it was Austin Matthews. Now Mitch Marner's kind of been brought up. And I mean, the whole captaincy thing keeps being thrown at Austin Matthews. But I think Mitch Marner is arguably up in the challenge for that.
You could definitely make that argument. I think it's still Austin Matthews, without a doubt. As a rookie, to score 40 goals in a season is pretty incredible, just looking back. And I mean, we see guys struggle to hit 50 year in, year out, whether they're a rookie or a vet. And so the fact that he's able to hit 40 in his rookie season says a lot. You also mentioned the captain talk. You do get a bit of a leadership feel even from Austin Matthews and the way he speaks as a rookie. Mitch Marner, no doubt, had a good year, or even a great year, 61 points, 19 goals. But, I mean, he didn't have half the goals that Matthews did and putting up 69 points. So, I mean, it was a very goal-heavy year for Matthews. But I think without a doubt, Austin Matthews has been the big thing with Austin Matthews. And we thought, one of the things with Toronto, obviously, in the fan base is that there's so much hype that they put into these guys, that they put into, their first overall pick since Wendell Clark. And there was a lot behind Austin Matthews expectation-wise, and he delivered. I mean, that's the surprising thing. Looking back, he delivered on the expectations that he had as a rookie, and we thought maybe he wouldn't be able to live up to it because it is Toronto and everybody's got their eyes on him, and that's a lot to live up to. But 1 year into it, he's probably going to win the Calder Trophy, and he's lived up to that hype, that being that first overall pick in the first in years for the Maple Leafs.
So Toronto's going up against Washington, and it almost seems like people are writing Toronto off already. Is that a smart thing to do, or do you think the Leafs actually have a chance?
the Leafs don't even stand a chance against the Capitals, to be completely honest with you. And obviously, a lot of people think that. So writing them off now, I mean, I think the Leafs maybe can win a game in this series, but beyond that, and a lot of things that people will bring up as well is the struggles that the Capitals have had come playoff time. But hey, maybe finally this is actually a different Capitals team. They win the President's Trophy in the regular season. They look phenomenal. They have great goaltending. Obviously, they have Alex Ovechkin, Nick Backstrom, a phenomenal defensive core as well. These Washington Capitals seem to be for real, and they're going to give the Maple Leafs a huge test. The Leafs are going to be in over their head just because they weren't even supposed to make the playoffs this year. They were the worst team in the NHL last year, not expected to do much this year. Now they actually got into the playoffs. They end up in that second wild card, and I mean that's a big thing for them to accomplish this year. But now for those young guys, they're going to be in over their head and in tough against a really tough Washington Capitals team. So yeah, I mean I don't see this going any further than 5 games at the most.
So sometimes trades work out in two teams' favors. In the Maple Leafs case, they got rid of Dion Phaneuf, and a year later, they're in the playoffs, and same with the Ottawa Senators, who acquired said Dion Phaneuf, except the Senators are up against the big bad Boston Bruins, or arguably the former big bad Bruins, as they've kind of departed a couple of their tough guys, if you will. Are you liking Ottawa's chance against the Bruins heading into this?
You know, I really do think this is a series that could go either way. It would have been the same way with the Maple Leafs if they had ended up in the series. I do like the Senators with getting Clark MacArthur back going into the playoffs. That's a huge help up front. As for the back end, still without Mark Methot for now. Eric Karlsson will be back, which obviously is the be-all and end-all for the Senators, as we found out. But, yeah, without Mark Methot, they're a little thin still on the back end. But I mean, you say, the big bad Boston Bruins, this is a team that isn't the same team that it has been in years prior. And losing Torrey Krug for who knows how long as well, it will be a potential big factor in the series as well. They will have a well-rested Marchand after that 2-game suspension to give them a break to the end of the regular season. This is a series that can go either way. They have goaltenders that can play phenomenally at times, and goaltenders as well that can turn it on come playoff time. So I'm excited to see how this plays out.
The Leafs are in, the Senators are in, Calgary is in, but nobody's really talking about Edmonton Oilers and how they've gone from one of the worst teams in the league to all of a sudden being one of the top teams. And it just feels like they've been kind of shoved off to the wayside in like Canadian priorities. But I mean, they're in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And they have a much better situation than what the Leafs do, because they're kind of similar in a way, obviously, with the young talent and all that, and how that's going to fare in the playoffs for a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in a while. So that's very similar in ways, but they're going to have a much more favorable matchup. So how that plays out will be really intriguing, just solely because they could realistically win that series, whereas with the Maple Leafs, we're not looking at that same sort of scenario. Like I said with the Maple Leafs, I mean, hey, maybe there's somebody thinking that they can pull out that series, but you're reaching there, I would say. And like I said, I don't think the Leafs can push it to 6 games. Edmonton, on the other hand, could realistically win their series, and if they do, it'd be intriguing also to see how far they can kind of push it as well, because they have Connor McDavid, and they have a physical guy like Milan Lucic, and there are still a lot of question marks on the team. There's no doubt about that. I mean, hey, McDavid in the playoffs, what is he going to play like when he's got that spot, like this specific spotlight on him? Now he's had previous, junior hockey spotlights on him like that, so maybe that'll help. But now the spotlight's on this team, which it hasn't really been in a while, and there's a lot of hype, so it'll be great to see how it plays out, and I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Now, moving on to the UFC, we're at UFC 210. It's weird to think that, you go back to UFC 100 and you see the big days of Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping, Cain Velasquez, and all of those, I guess kind of the early years of Brock Lesnar as well. But UFC 210 happened on the weekend. Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Johnson, number 2. And did this fight even have a purpose in going for a rematch, or do you think the UFC just likes bringing back these rematches to see what will happen?
Not necessarily, and a lot of that has to do with, who are they developing and who are they bringing into it. Obviously, a lot of those high-drawing ones will be, because that's how rivalries happen, is multiple fights. Really, once you get done that, assuming the first 2 are split, once you get done that third one, that's enough. for any kind of rivalry. We shouldn't get to where we're seeing, 4 or 5, like the sequel for like number 4, number 5 for guys. But up to 3 is all right. And if one guy wins the first 2, like DC did against Johnson, then that should be enough. And well, in the case of Johnson, I mean, now technically he is retired. I'm interested to hear because, I mean, the way he did it was strange. He's only 33 and could keep going. He's at his prime, was the number 1 contender. A lot of people had him favored to win this fight and win the championship over Daniel Cormier, and he lost it. He didn't stick to his game plan, and after the fight, he said that he's retiring and he has some other venture that he's going into, which means he has to retire, and he didn't close the door on potentially coming back if that didn't work out. So a really interesting situation for Rumble, but for Anthony Rumble Johnson. But ultimately, right now, what this does set up is Cormier and Jones number 2, which eventually should happen. Obviously, it's supposed to happen last July, I believe. And then Jones got the suspension, which will be up come this summer. So maybe we eventually get that fight. And hey, Jimmy Manawa as well. I mean, Daniel Cormier did a great job, and he's tremendous at this, at setting up future fights with the way he talks and what he says after a fight and using his time wisely. He, after that, last night, after his post-fight interview, he already made me interested in seeing him fight 2 more guys. Obviously John Jones, but that was a given, and the other one's Jimmy Manawa, who he had a back and forth with as well. Jimmy Manawa, similar knockout power to Rumble Johnson, one of the best in the division when it comes to knockout power, and ultimately Manawa will face Cormier, or will face the champion, I feel like, eventually. But a lot of people are waiting for that Jones-Cormier fight, which should happen sometime soon when Jones' suspension's up. But I mean, if it does happen, it's probably going to be late this year.
If you don't know what John's boned Jones suspension was, he got caught with some performance-enhancing drugs a while back, and he got a year or so suspension, if I remember correctly. But something interesting with this UFC 210 was that Daniel Cormier, who was the main card of the fight, weighed 1.2 pounds over the 205 limit, but he went away, and minutes later he came back weighing exactly 205 pounds. Now, some people said, oh, he did this or that, or maybe he threw up, or he went on like a super hard, intense workout and sweated it all out. What's your take on him being a bit over and then coming back in minutes' time and dropping over a pound?
Well, my take on it is that I don't know what the heck happened. I mean, the workout thing couldn't have happened because this was 2 minutes. He was 2 minutes off. Like, he weighed in at 1.2 over and was gone for like 2 minutes, came back, weighed in, and lost those 1.2 pounds to make the weight perfectly. A lot of people are saying the way he leaned on the towel, or that he was leaning on the towel when he weighed in that second time, and that's the difference, which I could maybe see that he somehow took the weight off of his arms, or the weight from his arms off of the scale, and that's what happened. Some people are saying something maybe a little more humorous, like he went to the washroom, I guess, and was able to drop 1.2 pounds that way. Funny thing was when Johnson weighed in as well, right around that same time. Because the intriguing thing with that as well is we were about 5 minutes before the cutoff date for the official weigh-ins, for these guys to weigh in for the fight to be official, and neither guy had been there to weigh in. Obviously, with Cormier, it was due to a tough weight cut, and eventually he was working his way to get to that scale, but he probably wanted to make sure he was at the weight beforehand and probably couldn't. I don't know why Rumble showed up as late as he did, but he weighed in right at that cutoff time at 11 o'clock, and he weighed in 1.2 under the limit as well. So maybe some people are thinking that the scale was somehow tampered with, which is interesting because the scale is in front of the media the entire time, and you'd think something like that would be obvious, but there's nobody physically going over. Like, it was on video and everything too, and nobody was like going over there to like tamper with it. So it's really interesting, but I'm glad the fight was finally able to happen. It was supposed to happen in December in Toronto, and that ended up not happening because Cormier got hurt, and then it would have been just devastating for the card and for UFC fans and Cormier Johnson and their fans as well if the fight was canceled for a second time just the day before. So that would have been really disappointing, and I mean, it's sort of irrelevant to it, but the way the whole thing went down as well with the card and the co-main event and with Chris Weidman, I'm not going to get too far into it, but with Weidman and Mousasi, and then we had the breast implant situation the day before with the weigh-ins with Pearl Gonzalez and Cynthia Calvillo, Man, the New York State Athletic Commission really needs to get their stuff together because they've really only had a couple cards, and so they're like Dana White said last night on, a couple nights ago, this is 2001 for them right now. And so, because they're new at this and they're going to get better as the years go on. But right now, they're really showing how far behind they are and being an athletic state commission with MMA and the UFC. And it's not looking very good. So I feel like the UFC really should take a break from fighting in New York just because that athletic state commission really needs to get their stuff together. It has not been good.
That's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at BSS Sports. Archiving all of our works on YouTube at BSS Productions. For Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Stephen Schill, we'll catch you next